Democrats on the Subcommittee on Cyber Information Technologies and Innovation to introduce a bill pushing back on President Trump's stated objectives regarding Greenland. Bacon is the chair of the committee. It's called the No Funds for NATO Invasion Act. It would prohibit federal funds from being used to invade a NATO member state or any territory protected by Article 5 of the North Atlantic Treaty. The act would also prohibit any officer or employee of the United States from taking any action to execute any such invasion. The members of Congress say the act, quote, demonstrates the strong commitment in the House of Representatives to support our NATO allies. They add, quote, we must cease the inflammatory rhetoric, work together to take advantage of our shared opportunities, and most importantly, to counter the real threats from those who do not share our values.